Shalom, Beth El family. It is Thursday, time to review once again the Torah Talk from here at Congregation Beth El in Norfolk. This past Shabbat, we read Parshat Tazria, a portion all about leprosy, this disease that seems to be almost of the spirit as much as of the body, as indicated that it would be diagnosed by the Kohen, by the priests, the religious leadership, and also cured through ritual. The Torah takes a lot of time talking about leprosy. We very rarely dig deeply into the details because, quite frankly, they're not all that pleasant. Diagnosing a disease with hairs growing out of blemishes that are white, that are not white, it's not so pleasant. But I want to focus in on one such detail from this week's Parsha, and I want to do it for two reasons. One is because Passover is right around the corner. And there's one command in the Torah, it comes later in Deuteronomy, that we shall not despise the Egyptians because we were sojourners in their land. It's a fascinating demand to make on a people where, remember, when we talk about slavery in Egypt, we talk about the right not to have your own right to even exist. Right? They were taking, not only were we working, at labor that we didn't have a choice in, and we were abused and didn't have control over our family life and our reproduction, but they were taking Jewish babies and throwing them into the Nile River. It was genocide. And yet, we're taught, don't despise the Egyptians because you were sojourners in their land. It seems to me that it would be very normal to despise those Egyptians, certainly to be disgusted by them. So that's number one that got me thinking about this. Number two is I learned a tractate of Talmud every year for the Fast of the Firstborn right before Passover. And it happened to be that this verse came up in my Talmud study and is it struck me there, and then when I read it in the Torah portion, it struck me again. So what's this verse? The verse is from Leviticus, Vayikra 13:13, chapter 13, verse 13, where it says, "V'ra'ah hakohen hine kista hatzarat et kol bisaro tiher et hanega kulo hafach levan tahurhu." So they're talking about this disease, and they say, if you see one blemish, the person is tameh, they are impure. But then the Kohen shall look, and behold, the tzara'at has covered all his flesh. This leprosy has covered every part of their body. The lesion is clean. The person has turned completely white. He is clean. This doesn't seem to make any sense. So let me just make sure that you understand. If you have even the littlest tiny bit of this white blemish with this white hair and it doesn't go away and maybe it spreads a little, then you are impure. You are diagnosed with having the disease. But if the Kohen looks and these blemishes have covered the person from head to toe, that they are covered in this white, scaly, gross skin disease, and when the Kohen sees them that way, that person, they're tahur, they're pure. Doesn't make any sense, right? Why would someone covered from head to toe in this disease be pure when someone who has even just a little bit is impure? Doesn't seem to make any sense. So in the Talmud that I was learning, Tractate Sanhedrin, Parshat 97a, they're talking about when will the time of the Messiah come? When will the line of David return? And they go through all these awful things. Right? Things are going to be really bad before they get good. And what's the explanation they give? From where is this drawn? Rava says, it's from the verse, it is all turned white, he is ritually pure. In other words, only when things are really, really completely awful, at their lowest point, only then will redemption come. Maybe because that's when we'll work for it. Right? You have to hit rock bottom before we'll work for the redemption. So I like that idea. But I had another thought about it that I think may be even closer to the truth. And that is that if you look at it, no one is ever covered from head to toe in a rash. They might have it everywhere, but there's always going to be spots where there are not spots. So I think the Torah is saying to us, if you look at a person and you say, ew, they're covered completely in leprosy, since no one is ever really covered completely in leprosy, you are no longer seeing the person as they are. The observation you're making is more about you and your biases than them. And you are using your disgust to dismiss them, to see them as less worthy of recognition than other people. So the Torah says to us, when you look at a person and you see that they are covered in this disgusting skin disease, this malady from head to toe, they are pure. I think what it's telling us is they are pure. How about it's time to inspect your own biases, your own feelings? You see, disgust, it's a very powerful human tool. There's an article by Martha Nussbaum called Hiding from Humanity, Disgust, Shame, and the Law. And in it, she says, disgust is different. Its cognitive content involves a shrinking from contamination that is associated with the human desire to be non-animal. That desire, of course, is irrational in the sense that we know that we will never be able to succeed in fulfilling it, right? We're always going to have to come into contact with disgusting things. Our bodies work sometimes in disgusting ways, right? Ways that we'd rather not advertise out there. But yet we try and rise above our animal self, but it's hard. It is also irrational in another and even more pernicious sense, says Dr. Nussbaum. As psychological research shows, people tend to project disgust properties onto groups of people in their own society who come to figure as surrogates for people's anxieties about their own animality, right? Not only are we kind of embarrassed about certain things about ourselves, but we use disgust, we project it on people who cause us anxiety. Sound familiar? By branding members of these groups as disgusting, foul, smelly, slimy, the dominant group is able to distance itself even further from its own animality. Such irrational projections have been involved in anti-Semitism throughout the ages and in misogyny in more or less every society. They are involved in more localized forms of discrimination, such as the traditional Hindu caste system, she says, as well as American discrimination against homosexuals. So do you see what she's saying here? Right? That disgust is something that we use, hopefully subconsciously, to see others as less than human so we can distance ourselves from them, so we can dismiss them. That's what the Torah is talking about here. When it says you look at someone and you see them as nothing but leprosy, you are projecting onto them something. It has nothing to do with who or what they are. And it's problematic. And I bring it up today because we are so apt to do it in our society. I feel like I see this happening all the time. People wielding their disgust in political conversations, in moral conversations. People don't just disagree with people anymore. They are repulsed by their views, disgusted by them. I can't even talk to them. There's no redeeming quality in those people at all because they hold this view or that view. They're not even people. The Torah says no. No. And that's why we are not to despise an Egyptian. Because yes, there were Egyptians in Egypt who did some really awful things to us. Genocide level things to us. But when we look at an Egyptian individual, says the Torah, we're not to see all of that and say, oh, you're disgusting. Egyptians are disgusting because they did this to the Jewish people, and project on them that somehow their ethnicity makes them diseased or less than human or less than us. No. It says, look, you were sojourners in their land. They are people and you are people. And when you see an individual, you are to treat them as such. Right? To do otherwise is to fall victim to discrimination and bias. And I'm afraid we're doing that perhaps a little too much, a lot too much in our society. And so as we turn to this holiday of Passover, and we may be tempted to look at all those who have done wrong to us, all those with whom we disagree, and dismiss them as something other. Let's instead do what Passover tells us to do. Sit together, discuss, explore, learn from one another. Appreciate the complexities and nuances. Understand that everyone is an individual and not completely defined by whatever surface level categories we give them. When we do all that, we will be able to look at the world as it is, to work to make it better, to help those who are really ill, to educate those who are really ignorant, and ultimately to help bring about that redemption that we learn about in the Passover story, a true redemption, an opportunity to make this world better, which is what it's all about. I hope we're all able to do that, to recognize ourselves when we are seeing the other as the other, and by facing those own anxieties that cause us to do so, to help us get in the trenches and make this world better. Shabbat Shalom.